Come on, just one more spoonful for Papa. You can do it. The autumn rain hammered gently against the windows of Bella Vista, the cozy little restaurant that Chef Marco Romano had poured his soul into for the last 3 years. At 36, Marco had given up his ambition of running a high-end city bistro for something far more priceless. A life where he could be fully present for his 4-year-old daughter, Isabella. On this quiet Tuesday night, the dining room was nearly empty, just the way Marco liked it during the week. It gave him space to test new recipes while Isabella sat at the corner table, her golden curls glowing under the soft Edison lights he had strung up himself. "Papa, I'm hungry," Isabella piped up, glancing up from her coloring. Tonight's creation was a very purple elephant with wings. What would my little chef like tonight? Marco asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "Can you make the soup that tastes like hugs?" she requested, meaning the butternut squash soup he had perfected just for her, lightly kissed with cinnamon and vanilla. "Of course, Piccola," Marco said warmly, kissing the crown of her head. "But first, let Papa finish tomorrow's prep." As he turned back toward the kitchen, the front door chimed. A woman stepped inside, clutching an umbrella, a sleek briefcase, and a baby carrier that rocked with the cries of a distressed infant. The woman looked to be in her late 30s, blonde hair pinned in a bun now loosened by the rain. Her tailored navy suit damp at the shoulder. Despite the wealth written in her appearance, her expression bore the fatigue of someone who had been stretched past her breaking point. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice strained. "Are you still open?" Marco glanced at the clock. It was well past closing, but the desperation in her tone left him no choice but to nod. "Of course, please, sit anywhere you'd like." The woman, Catherine Blackwell, settled at a table near the kitchen and gently set down the carrier. Inside was a 6-month-old baby with a cry so fierce it filled the restaurant. Catherine, the billionaire CEO who had built Blackwell Enterprises from a tiny firm into a global empire, was known for conquering any deal, handling any crisis, and never breaking under pressure. But tonight in this quiet little restaurant, with her baby's cries echoing off the walls, she looked utterly defeated. "I'm sorry," Catherine said as Marco approached, her voice trembling under the weight of exhaustion. She gestured helplessly toward the infant squirming in her carrier. "She's been crying for hours. I've tried everything. Feeding, rocking, singing, but nothing works. The nanny quit this morning without notice, and now," her words broke off in frustration. Marco studied the baby's desperate cries, his instincts as a single father immediately kicking in. He had seen Isabella in every stage of meltdown, and he recognized that kind of cry. It wasn't anger, it was need. Gently, he leaned forward. "May I?" he asked softly, his voice calm but firm. Catherine hesitated. She was used to being in control, the woman who could negotiate contracts worth millions without blinking. But here, with her crying baby and unraveling composure, she felt powerless. Finally, she gave a shaky nod. Marco lifted the child with practiced care, rocking her gently in his arms. "Ciao, Bella," he murmured in Italian, his tone soothing and musical. "What troubles you tonight?" To Catherine's astonishment, the baby's cries slowed to small hiccups, as though curiosity had replaced distress. "She's hungry," Catherine admitted quickly, holding up the bottle. "But every time I try, she refuses." Marco examined the bottle with a chef's scrutiny, testing a drop against his lips, his brows furrowed. "This is too cold. Babies her age need milk close to body temperature, like their mother's milk. If it's colder, their little bodies reject it." "Body temperature," Catherine repeated, bewildered. The nanny always said it didn't matter. Marco shook his head gently. "Every baby is different. Isabella, my daughter, was the same way. Precise, particular. If her milk wasn't perfect, she pushed it away." He handed the baby back with steady hands. "Let me warm this properly." Catherine nodded, watching as he carried the bottle into the kitchen. Instead of quick fixes, Marco moved with meticulous care. He filled a saucepan with water, testing the heat until it reached the precise warmth he knew was right. "The secret," he called out, "is exactly 37 degrees, not warmer, not cooler. Babies know the difference." Catherine sat silently, her baby resting against her chest. Across the room, Isabella skipped over, clutching a crayon-stained page. "Your baby is very pretty," the little girl said earnestly. "Is she sad?" "She's hungry," Catherine confessed, oddly comforted by the child's innocent concern. "But she won't." Papa makes the best food in the whole world, Isabella declared proudly. He can fix anything. Marco returned with the warmed bottle and offered it to Catherine. With hesitant hands, she guided it to her daughter's lips. To her astonishment, the baby latched instantly, her frantic cries melting into quiet, eager gulps. Relief washed over Catherine's face as her daughter finally fed. "How did you know?" she whispered. Marco smiled gently, sliding into the chair across from her. "When you're a single parent, you notice every detail. Every cry means something. Every silence has a reason." "Single parent," Catherine echoed. "Yes." Marco's voice was steady but his eyes softened. "Isabella's mother left when she was 6 months old. She said motherhood wasn't what she expected. At first it was unbearable, but in time, Isabella and I figured it out together." Catherine blinked back sudden tears. "I've built $1 billion company from nothing, but I can't figure out how to feed my own child." Marco leaned forward. "What's her name?" "Sophia," Catherine said softly, glancing at the now content baby. "Sophia," Marco repeated with a smile. "Wisdom. A beautiful name." "She's 6 months old," Catherine continued, her voice trembling. "I thought I could balance everything. Motherhood, work, but I feel like I'm failing at both. The nanny was supposed to help, but Sophia cried constantly. I thought maybe she was just difficult." "No baby is difficult," Marco said firmly. "They only have needs we haven't yet understood." From the corner, Isabella chimed in. "Papa, remember when I used to cry all the time?" Marco chuckled. "You were never difficult, Piccola. You just needed things done a certain way." "What kind of way?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious. Marco thought a moment. Her bottles had to be the right warmth. She needed to be held a certain way. Silence during feeding. No noise, no distractions, and above all she needed to feel safe. Babies sense everything. Stress, fear, even impatience. If the person feeding them is tense, they feel it too. Catherine swallowed hard, replaying the moments of rocking Sophia with panic in her chest. Her phone buzzing with work emails nearby. "When was the last time you ate?" Marco asked suddenly. Catherine blinked. "This morning, I think. And the last time you slept more than 2 hours." Her silence was answer enough. Marco sighed softly, rising to his feet. "Then let's start there." He turned to Isabella. "Amor, shall we make something special for our guest tonight?" "Yes, Pop." Isabella scrambled eagerly to her step stool in the kitchen. Catherine watched in quiet awe as father and daughter moved like a team. Isabella measured flour with careful hands while Marco guided her steady and patient. Their rhythm was unspoken, a bond built from countless nights, spent in kitchens, just like this. Soon the restaurant filled with the rich aroma of roasted squash and herbs, the fragrance of warmth itself. Marco's voice carried back. "Good food isn't about fancy recipes. It's about knowing what someone needs, and cooking with love." Catherine sat back, her baby finally at peace, her own chest easing for the first time in weeks. In this little restaurant, with a single father and his child, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. When Marco returned from the kitchen 20 minutes later, he carried a steaming bowl that filled the room with the fragrance of roasted squash, cinnamon and herbs. He set it gently in front of Catherine, the steam curling upward like an invitation. "This is Isabella's favorite," Marco explained. "I created it when she was teething and wouldn't eat anything else. Simple, but it comforts." Catherine lifted her spoon hesitantly, then took a sip. The warmth spread through her chest instantly, the subtle sweetness mingling with savory undertones. It wasn't just food, it was a feeling. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "This is incredible," she whispered, almost embarrassed by her own emotion. Marco smiled faintly. "The recipe is simple, but intention is the most important ingredient. When you cook for someone you love, the food carries that love." Catherine looked down at Sophia, who was now sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with dream. "I don't think I know how to do that," Catherine admitted. "Do what?" Marco asked. "Love her the way she needs to be loved. I can run meetings, negotiate contracts, close deals, but I can't even comfort my own baby." Marco leaned back, studying her carefully. "Signora, may I ask you something personal?" Catherine nodded slowly, bracing herself. "Why did you have Sophia?" The question landed like a stone in her chest. She looked down at the sleeping infant, her throat tightening. "I'm 38, she began softly. "I've achieved every professional goal I set for myself. I have more money than I could ever spend, but I realized none of it would outlast me. Businesses rise and fall. Stock prices change overnight. I wanted to create something real, something that mattered beyond profit and loss. She brushed her fingers across Sophia's tiny hand. I thought she would be that, but instead, her voice cracked. Instead, I feel like I've already failed her. Marco's gaze softened. You haven't failed. You're simply trying to solve family the same way you solve business. But they are different worlds. In business, you take control, make quick decisions, push forward. But with children, sometimes the answer is to slow down, to let them show you what they need. Catherine let out a shaky laugh. Slow down. I don't know how to do that. My whole life has been about control. At that moment, Isabella skipped back to the table, proudly holding her coloring book. Would you like to see my elephant? She asked Catherine. Catherine smiled despite her tears. Of course, the drawing was a lopsided purple elephant with wings. Catherine laughed gently. She's beautiful. What's special about her? She can fly, Isabella said matter-of-factly. And she takes care of baby elephants, who don't have mamas. The words struck Catherine like lightning. Her chest tightened, her throat closing around the lump that rose. She looked at Isabella, this child who had grown up without a mother, speaking so innocently about motherless elephants. Do you miss having a mama? Catherine asked carefully. Isabella paused, considering it with unusual seriousness. Sometimes, she admitted, but Papa takes very good care of me. He says families are like puzzle pieces. Some have mama pieces, some have papa pieces, or grandma or auntie pieces. As long as the pieces fit together with love, it's a good family. Catherine's eyes burned. She turned to Marco. You taught her that? Marco shook his head gently. She taught me. Children understand love in ways adults forget. For the first time that evening, Catherine let herself exhale. She felt a strange, almost foreign warmth settle in her chest. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as she thought. Over the next hour, Marco told stories of his early days as a single parent. The endless nights, the trial and error, the small victories that felt like miracles. Catherine listened intently, her soup bowl empty, her heart slowly filling with something far more nourishing. The turning point, Marco said quietly, came when I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. Isabella didn't need me to have all the answers. She needed me to pay attention, to respond with patience and love. Catherine stared at him, her voice almost breaking. How do I learn that? Marco smiled. The same way you learn to run your company. One decision at a time, one day at a time. But instead of quarterly reports, you measure success in smiles, in peaceful sleep, in moments like this. The clock ticked softly in the background, and Catherine realized she hadn't felt this calm in months. When she finally rose to leave, Sophia still sleeping soundly, a wave of reluctance washed over her. The thought of returning to her empty penthouse and relentless emails filled her with dread. Marco, she said, gathering her things, would you teach me, not just about bottles or food, but about all of it, about being the kind of mother Sophia deserved? Marco looked startled. Senora, I'm just a small restaurant owner. You could hire experts, nannies, consultants, people more qualified than me. I could, Catherine admitted, but experts teach techniques. I don't need more technique. I need to learn what you have, how to put love into the daily act of caring. That's what she needs. And maybe, that's what I need too. For the first time, Catherine felt a flicker of something stronger than exhaustion. It wasn't confidence yet, but it was. 6 months later, Catherine's kitchen looked nothing like the sleek showroom it had once been. The polished steel counters and untouched appliances now bore the warm evidence of use. Pots drying on the rack, spice jars neatly lined along the backsplash, a half-written recipe card resting by the stove. At the center of it all stood Catherine, holding a small bottle against her wrist to test the warmth. She smiled softly. Exactly 37 degrees, just as Marco had taught her. Sophia gurgled happily in her high chair, clapping tiny hands at the sight of her mother. Catherine leaned down, brushing a kiss against her daughter's cheek before offering the bottle. This time Sophia drank without fuss, her eyes locked on her mother's face, as if reassured by the calm radiating from her. It wasn't always this smooth. Catherine still remembered the first nights when she tried to mimic Marco's methods, fumbling through the process, second-guessing every step. But each time she returned to Bella Vista, Marco reassured her with patience. It's not about perfection, he reminded her. It's about presence. And so Catherine practiced presence. She cleared her evenings, learned to silence her phone during feedings,
and even dared to sing softly to Sophia. Italian lullabies. Marco had once hummed to Isabella. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension left Sophia's cry. The once restless baby grew calmer, more secure, her tiny world steadied by her mother's newfound patience. At Bella Vista, Catherine became a familiar sight. Each week she would arrive with Sophia in tow, greeted by Isabella's delighted squeals. "Sophia, come, play," the little girl would shout, tugging the baby's hand as though she were already a trusted sister. Catherine would watch the two children together, Isabella's protective nature, Sophia's infectious giggles, and wonder if this was what family was meant to feel like. Marco guided Catherine gently, never lecturing, always demonstrating. He showed her how to prepare simple soups and soft foods, explaining how every ingredient carried intention. "When you cook for someone you love," he told her again and again, "you're feeding more than the body, you're feeding the soul." Catherine found herself not only cooking for Sophia but cooking for herself too. Meals that once consisted of quick takeout or skipped dinners transformed into shared rituals. Even on the nights when exhaustion pressed heavy on her shoulders, she remembered Marco's words and prepared something warm. It wasn't about effort, it was about love. Her professional life began to shift as well. For years she had prided herself on being the first in the office and the last to leave, the engine that never slowed. But now she delegated more, trusting her team with responsibilities she had once guarded fiercely. She restructured Blackwell Enterprises, implementing systems that allowed her to work from home 3 days a week. To her surprise, the business didn't falter. It flourished. Freed from micromanagement, her employees thrived, and Catherine discovered that leadership wasn't about control, but about trust. For the first time, her company served her life instead of consuming it. One evening, as the golden light of sunset filtered into Bella Vista, Catherine found herself sitting across from Marco, Sophia asleep in her carrier beside her. Isabella was chattering animatedly, retelling the story of her flying elephant for what must have been the 10th time. Catherine laughed, her shoulders relaxed in a way she hadn't known they could be. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked Marco, her tone somewhere between gratitude and awe. He tilted his head. "What do you mean? You didn't just help me feed my daughter. You taught me how to love her the way she needs. You showed me how to slow down, how to be present. That first night I thought you were just teaching me about warming a bottle. But it was more than that. You were giving me a recipe for something I didn't know I was missing." Marco looked down modestly, his hands folded on the table. "I only shared what life forced me to learn. The real teacher is Sophia, and you chose to listen." Catherine smiled, her eyes warm. "Still, I'll never forget it. You gave me back my daughter and maybe even myself." She glanced around the small restaurant, its worn wooden tables glowing in the soft light, Isabella's laughter ringing like music. It was a far cry from the world of glass skyscrapers and boardrooms she had once believed was everything. Here, in this humble space, she had discovered something more valuable than any contract or quarterly profit. That night, before she left, Marco handed her a small piece of paper. "Here," he said with a grin, "for your collection." Catherine unfolded it to find the butternut squash soup recipe, written in his careful handwriting. But as she read the simple list of ingredients, she realized it wasn't the soup itself that mattered. It was what the recipe represented. Patience, care, intention. Back home, Catherine framed it and hung it in her kitchen, not as a guide for cooking, but as a daily reminder of the lesson Marco had given her, that nourishment is more than food and love is more than work. Over time, Catherine stopped measuring her worth by profit margins or board approvals. Her success was now measured in Sophia's smiles, in the soft weight of her daughter resting peacefully against her chest, in the small victories of bedtime stories and lullabies. And though Catherine never called it aloud, she knew deep inside that her family, unconventional though it was whole. The puzzle pieces fit: Isabella with her fearless imagination, Marco with his steady wisdom, Sophia with her infectious innocence, and Catherine herself, finally learning to love without fear of imperfection. It was not the family she had once pictured, but it was a family built on something stronger than appearances. It was built on love. If this story touched you and reminded you that the most powerful lessons in life aren't found in boardrooms or balance sheets, but in the quiet, patient practice of love and presence, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need this reminder. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected teachers, unlikely families, and the beautiful ways that parenthood can reshape our understanding of true success. And I'd love to hear from you. Comment below about a time when someone showed you the meaning of love or family through their actions, rather than their words. Your story might be exactly what another parent or another heart needs to hear today.